Hello, Theodore Schubot here, giving you guys another message that you will not hear at church. I guarantee that. I was sent a story today from the Mexican media. Just came out very recently. I think it came out today. Actually, yeah, it came out today, January 3rd, 2016. And it is about the horrific war that is taking place in Mexico. There's literally a civil war taking place in Mexico, and everyone's acting like everything's okay. You know, everything is well here in North America. It's just over there in the Middle East. Nothing bad happening here. Oh no, Mexico's still a great country. It's a great place to go drink tequila and to go drink margaritas with your drunk friends and get your skin all red and to wear Hawaiian shirts and to just annoy the locals. Yep, that's Mexico, and we're acting as though everything is okay. We're not acting as though there is a civil war. And there is indeed a civil war happening in Mexico. And I was sent this story. It was a great, very well written article published by sinembargo.mx, which is a Mexican news outlet. And they wrote a very good article on what exactly is taking place, a lot of stories and experiences as to what is happening specifically in the area of Tierra Caliente, which is a very large region in Mexico, and it is part of the state of Michoacan. And so there is a part of the story that is extremely sad, and it's the story about a poor avocado farmer. His daughter, who was about 14 years of age, was kidnapped by the Templars. Now, if you watch my videos, you know that I have talked about the Templars a great deal. The Templars they are considered to be a criminal organization, and they are, but that's all they are portrayed as. That's all they're described as. They're only described as a drug cartel or a criminal organization, and it doesn't really go beyond that. The media is not really telling us all the facts. The fact is that the Templars are a Protestant, Mexican Protestant cult that initially started out as a religious organization, only to later develop themselves into a drug cartel in order to make lots of money. It's really no different than ISIS. ISIS is a first and foremost a religious group, an Islamic terrorist group, and they also sell heroin. So ISIS is also a drug cartel, but never once have I ever heard of ISIS being described by a drug cartel, except from my own mouth. And they are always described as an Islamic terrorist group, as a religious extremist organization. But the Templars are always described as a cartel. The fact is that the Templars are just as much of a cartel as ISIS, and they are just as much of a religious extremist group as ISIS, or a religious terrorist group as ISIS is. ISIS is an Islamic terrorist group. The Templarios are a anti-Catholic Protestant group, and they are killing and butchering Catholics. And no one is really talking about this. No one, and when they do talk about it, they only talk about it as though it's a cartel issue. They don't bring up the religious factor. They don't bring up the religious foundation of this group, the religious cause of this group. They believe that they have the divine right to kill people that don't want to submit to them, just like Islam. And what they are well known for is to go into rural areas in Mexico, and they tell the farmers, especially avocado and lime farmers, that they have to pay a certain tax from all of their sales. You're talking about people that are very poor. They make their living almost solely out of selling vegetables, limes and avocados, and they don't have they have they're burdened enough by paying the taxes that the government demands of them. Now they have to pay a tax to the Templars, which is a cult, an evil demonic cult. And so there was a avocado farmer, and this goes back to the article that I read today. There was an avocado farmer, and this is just one story out of many. This is not an isolated incident. This is not just one small example out of a few examples. No, this is one example out of countless examples. There was an avocado farmer in Michoacan. The Templars came in and they said, you have to pay us a tax. Just as ISIS goes into Christian areas in Iraq and says to the Christians, you have to pay us a tax. So they go to the avocado farmer and they say, you need to pay a tax. And they kidnapped the avocado farmer's daughter, who was only 14 years old, and they said to the farmer, you have to pay us 14 million pesos or your daughter is going to be in a body bag. Just like that. The farmer was able to accumulate around 7 million pesos, which is not that much when you compare it to American currency, but over there it's a lot. And he says, listen, he tells the Templars, I have 7 million pesos. I will compensate the rest with the avocado trees, and if it comes down to it, with the clothes on our backs. But please just let my daughter go. The Templars tell the farmer that, well, that's a good enough deal. We agree with the deal. Meet us at this specific location, and we will give you the daughter back, and you give us the 7 million pesos. So the farmer goes to the location, gives them the 7 million pesos. They take the money, and he says, now please give me back my daughter. They say, here is your daughter, and they give him the dismembered corpse. Of course, no one's talking about this. Very few people in the English-speaking media are speaking about this. We're always focusing on what's happening in the Middle East. We're not even focusing on what's happening right next door. I'm reading a good book right now. I think a lot of you guys, or anyone who's interested, should buy this book. It's called Blood-Drenched Altars, and it's written by a priest by the name of Reverend Francis Clement Kelly. It's a history of Mexico, going all the way back to the Spanish conquest to now. Well, to the 1920s. The book was written, I believe, in the 20s. It was written in the mid-1900s during the time of the Cristero Revolt, in which the tyrant Plutarco Elias Calles began to kill Catholics and kill priests, and he tried to destroy Catholicism in Mexico. And so, at that time, many Catholics were focusing on what was happening in Mexico. And this priest wrote a book in order to explain to the American people why Mexico is the way it is. And he links it all the way back before the conquest of Mexico. He links it and traces it all the way back to the rivalry between Spain and England. England and Spain, they hated each other. And a lot of it had to do with sectarianism. Spain was Catholic, England was Protestant. And so the English and the Spaniards were trying to control the seas. Now, other than the fact that it was about domination of the seas, it was about domination overall, we cannot deny the religious factor involved in this rivalry. The English did not want to see Catholics rule the seas. They wanted to see Protestants rule the seas. So you had the Spanish Armada and the English sea dogs fighting and killing each other. And that rivalry developed and sparked a hatred and an animosity that is so ineffable it continues on even till this day. Mexico is a extension, religiously wise, language wise, and culturally wise. It is an extension of Spain. Now, I've been to Mexico. I used to live in Mexico. I lived there for a year and 4 months. And I also have been to Spain, and I can tell you, by being in both countries, they are very similar. The Mexicans will deny it, the Spaniards will deny it, but those of us who have been to both will say, yeah, most definitely there are similarities, huge similarities. America is an extension of England. So religious-wise, culturally-wise, language-wise, it is an extension of English people, of the English nation, of the UK. It used to be under England. So naturally we would adopt English culture. Of course, America developed its own aspects of culture, just as the Mexicans did, but you can never get rid of what remnants of English culture remain. So, with the extension of England being America and the extension of Spain being Mexico, the animosity still continues. And so you have, for example, all the violence that took place against Catholics in the 1920s. America supported Caius. They went against the Cristero Revolution. Now contrast that to the revolution that took place in Mexico, I believe at around, what was it, 1819? America supported that revolution to go against the Spaniard. And then you also have the what's interesting is that America supported that revolution in defense of democracy and in republicanism. Being a republic, they wanted Mexico to supposedly have American values. But when Caius took power, I believe in 1926, Caius began to destroy Catholicism. He began to suppress and persecute Catholics. And then there was a revolution called the Cristero Revolution. Why didn't America support the Cristero Revolution? America supported the Caius government, which was tyrannical, which was against democracy, which was anti-American. Yet America, instead of going for the people of independence, they went against the people of tyranny. They supported the people of tyranny, and they went against the people who wanted freedom of religion. So when America says, "Oh, we are helping this nation with their revolution in defense of democracy," that's a bunch of bullcrap. It's all bullcrap. It's the same thing. Well, it's the same thing with America helping the Egyptians. It's a load of malarkey. They don't care. The American government doesn't give a crap about democracy. Doesn't give a crap about Republican government. None of that stuff. It doesn't. It cares about making sure that rival nations stay at a low position and American values or American allies, allies that America greatly values or sees, not really values, but they see a benefit in being allies with them. They make sure that those nations also stay on top. So they don't want, America doesn't want Mexico to really get anywhere. At one point in time, Mexico was more wealthy than the U.S. That's when America was still a very young nation. So America is going to support the forces that will keep Mexico at a low level. They will support Caius because that keeps the Catholics down. And there are many Protestants in America who want to see Catholicism destroyed. It's just not saying that's for every Protestant out there, but they are most definitely Protestants in America who would love to see that. The KKK supported Caius. They even said, we'll give you like $12 million or something like that to help your campaign against the papacy. Margaret Sanger supported the Caius government, and she was an Episcopalian Protestant, and she hated Catholicism. She wanted to see the destruction of Catholicism. And here's another thing I want to bring to mind. It's not just Mexico. We saw this in the 70s, going all the way to the 80s and all the way to the 90s, when the U.S. again supported the forces of tyranny and went against the forces of liberty. We saw this in Indonesia. Indonesia is the most Muslim nation on earth. It's almost 100% Islamic. But there is a small state of Indonesia called East Timor, which is almost, I would say it's 100% Catholic, with the exception of some Protestant groups here and there. And the Catholics in East Timor, they wanted an independent state. I believe I've recounted this history to you before, but for those of you who don't know, or for those of you who need their minds to be refreshed in this history, I'm going to explain this to you guys again. East Timor declared independence, just as the U.S. declared independence against Great Britain. And you would think America, being the nation that has boasted itself since its very beginning, since its very independence, of being a nation that is here or that is chosen by Providence to be an illumination to the rest of the world as to the greatness and glory of liberty, you would think that they would support the East Timorese people and go against the Indonesians. Here are the East Timorese declaring independence, just as our founding fathers declared independence from Great Britain, and they have always, I mean, going back, John Adams, I believe, said that America was to be an illumination to the world that would bring light to the nations that are under the darkness of tyranny, and some rhetoric like that. You would think America would say, here, East Timorese people, you're declaring independence from this Islamic tyranny, we're going to help you. No, America instead gives weapons to the Indonesians to keep the Catholics down. So the animosity that England shared against the papacy extended to the US. And the US has done a very good job at making sure that not just Catholic nations, but Eastern Orthodox countries have been decimated. So you see what happens. So, for example, the US, England, and Australia, all extensions, the US, England, and Australia, all nations that are related. I mean, Australia and America are daughters of, or children of England. So here's Australia and America, both extensions of England, and England herself, with the great Margaret Thatcher that you people love to use as a great exemplary of feminine power and a good example of a righteous female leader, which she wasn't. England, Australia, and America supported Indonesia in destroying the underdog, and East Timor was the underdog. Hundreds of thousands of Catholics were killed. Over 100,000 Catholic women were raped. Very similar to what happened in Nanking when the Japanese entered China and they went into monasteries and they used the monasteries as rape centers. So you also have ISIS butchering Catholics and Eastern Orthodox. What's America doing about that? Absolutely nothing. America, in fact, has supported these killings by giving weapons to Muslims, by empowering rebels or terrorist organizations, by getting rid of Saddam Hussein, who protected the Christians. You also have Bill Clinton bombing Serbia in order to help the Muslims. Why? Because the Serbs are Eastern Orthodox, and they're just Eastern Orthodox. Let them die. Who cares? We're going to help our fellow heretics, the Muslims. And the Muslim, Islam, and I was thinking about this today, and I've said this before numerous times, but I've added some additions to this discourse. Islam is a pre-Reformation Protestant group. So people out there will say, well, it's not a pre-Reformation Protestant group, Tank. Muhammad wasn't living in the time of Martin Luther. And I'm like, wow, you think you're so clever by saying that. If you're not going to consider Muhammad a pre-Reformation Protestant reformer, because that's what he was a reformer. He came over and said, these are the true teachings of Jesus. The church got it wrong. I got it right. Follow me. And he wanted Christians to reform the theology that they were accustomed to, in accordance to what the church was teaching, and it still teaches. And so if you're not going to consider the Muslims or Islam to be a pre-Reformation Protestant sect, then you cannot consider the Hussites to be a pre-Reformation Protestant sect. You cannot consider the Lollards. You cannot say that of all the Gnostic sects that lived in Eastern and Western Europe. You shouldn't consider any of these groups pre-Reformation Protestant sects. Yet you have these Baptist pseudo-historians who come out and say that these are the pre-Reformation Protestant sects. Well, if you're going to do that, and that's fine if you want to, but if you're going to do that, you should add Islam in the list, because that's what Islam is. In fact, Islam is so Protestant against Catholicism. It expresses such an immense, deplorable hatred for Rome that it tried to invade Rome, and Muhammad ordered the invasion of Rome. And the Muslims tried to invade Rome 7 freaking times. So while the Protestants are sitting there in their little libraries talking about, oh, we're reformers and we're going to show people the true faith and true theology, Muslims were trying to destroy Rome. So which one is more Protestant? It's quite obvious. I think you know the answer to that. And so here the Americans will help the Muslims kill Catholics and kill Eastern Orthodox. The Americans will support the cartels, because that's what's going on. Who's supporting the cartels? Who's armed the cartels? Look what America did under the Bush administration, the Merida Initiative. Look at what they're doing now. They gave all these weapons to Mexico, and the Mexican soldiers, people within the Mexican military, corrupt elements within the Mexican military, sold weapons to cartels. And what type of weapons do the Templars have? Look at the weapons that they have. They are armed with a G3 HK, or an HK-G3, which is a German weapon. They've been designing those weapons, I think, since World War II. And Germany is selling the weapons to the Mexican military. Mexican military is passing down those weapons to the Templarios, the Templars, the very people, Protestant terrorists who are killing Catholics. Um, and you don't think the Germans know that this is happening? You don't think the Germans know? You don't think they have intelligence that reveals to them that, hey, if we sell weapons to the Mexican government, those weapons are going to go to Templars? They know exactly what they're doing. They don't care. They don't care. Just Catholics being killed. Who cares? Just some poor Mexican Catholics. Who cares? Let them die. And here you have Bill Clinton, who bombed the Serbs, killed Orthodox people. And there's a long history of this. You go back to the Ottoman, when the Ottomans were trying to invade Europe. Who helped the Ottomans? The English. The English helped the Ottomans. I believe the Americans also helped out with some firearms here and there. The English were selling tin to the Ottomans so they could build their cannons. The Germans were also helping the Ottomans. When the Ottomans tried to invade Belgrade, the Germans refused to help the Eastern Orthodox and the Catholics defend Belgrade because they did not want to support the Eastern Orthodox. They did not want to support the Catholics in their defense of the Eastern Orthodox. Why? Because those are the heretics. We are the Protestant people. Now, there's many great Protestant people out there. I've met many good, very good Protestant people out there. And I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about these people who have such evil animosity toward Catholics that they would not mind aiding or supporting while turning a blind eye in the killing of Catholics. I think this is absolutely evil. But you just look at this story that I read in the Mexican news today about this poor girl who was dismembered and her poor father. I mean, the guy is so sad. It's so sad. So damn sad. He got whatever money he could, 7 million pesos, whatever money he could scrape, and said, listen, if it comes down to it, I'll give you the trees, I'll give you even the clothes in my bag. And they took the money and they said, here's your daughter. Imagine you being in his shoes. Imagine yourself in this man's shoes. I don't even have kids and I feel sad thinking about it. For those of you who have children, put yourself in this man's shoes, honestly. And that's why we're helping people in Mexico. We're helping victims of the cartels, rescue Christians. We're still doing work in Pakistan, but we also see the horrendous atrocities that are being done in Mexico and the immense amount of work that we need to be doing to help these victims. We got to help these people because they're being persecuted by these demonic cultists. And the Templars are just absolutely evil. They drink human blood. They take children and they drink their blood. They do this in Mexico. These are demonic cultists. And they're no different than ISIS, maybe even worse. But you got ISIS right next door, and we're still talking about what's happening in the Middle East. So we got to make ourselves aware of this reality. Bottom line, this is Theodore Schubot. I hope you guys have enjoyed this message. Well, there's nothing really to enjoy. It's all very, very dismal. But ultimately, I hope you guys have learned something from this message. You just heard some theology. God bless, and God be with us.